I really looked forward to my lessons with him because I loved all my teachers. Really, I did. And but when you have a recording of someone that you're looking at since you're 12 years old and you finally get to study with them, you've been building things up for a long time. And, there was something about John, because of the way his mind worked and the way he felt things, that he would make you think. And I was prone to that anyway. So it was fantastic. I lived on a farm when I was growing up for part of my youth. Not all of it like he did. And we'd talk about that a bit. He would talk about his kids sometimes in the lessons, and his wife, Wendy, at the time. And we would fold in life to the lessons too, but it was always on task with what we had to do with the instrument. But he was very aware of the psychological, emotional components, and that not everybody can play the same way. He was very clear about that. And that only fostered my belief of that anyway, but really brought it to another level where I could, open up things more and more and more for myself. And I remember one of the lessons we started to talk about Steve Zelmer, my teacher, and I found out that Steve Zelmer and John Swallow actually played in the same trombone section, I think, in the Grand Park Orchestra. And I don't know the nature of their relationships. They were very, very different kinds of players. But I said to John, because he didn't really, he had such a youthful thing about him. And I said, but you're not as old as Zelmer. He said, what are you talking about? I'm older. I said, no, you're not. He said, yes, I am. And he took out his license. And I'm very good with remembering dates. And he said, look at this. March 22nd, 1924. I remember seeing it on his license. And I went, wow, you're right. You're like, a year or so older, because Stephen Zelmer was born November 28th, 1925. He said, see, I told you. And at that time, John was 49 in 1973. So I remember we kind of laughed about that. And there's so many little human type stories within these lessons. I remember another time where he was trying to get a hold of me. And we didn't have cell phones, obviously, back then. And I said, oh, I don't know why you can't get a hold of me. He said, well, I try you in the evenings, your home telephone number. I also try you very early in the morning. I said, oh, because I used to go to school and practice very early. Like I'd get there sometimes at around 7, 7:30 at the latest, sometimes even earlier, because the school back then actually used to open at 6. And he looked at me kind of with a certain kind of knowing look, and he said, what's her number? And I said, what? And he said, what's her number? And so I told him this number of this girl I was seeing at the time, and he wrote it down in his little book, and he put a little heart next to it, or He put the number inside the heart or something like that. I'll never forget that. It's such a funny moment with this knowing, putting the little heart there. And like I said, it was such a human thing. He didn't try to put on some, I am the master, you know? He was really into the process. He wasn't into making clones. And I never, thank God, I never had a teacher who was into making clones. Ever. They would suggest their ways, I would take it up. And so I was with John and I was taking up different ways of doing things. I never threw away what else I was doing, but I was adding it. And every time you add something, it changes the balances, doesn't it? And that's what John's influence was doing to me. I thought in a really good way. And I remember I came to Boston, and I came with my Con. What was it, a Con 42? It didn't have, Con, what was it called? Con 8H. It wasn't a 42. It did not have a trigger. So he said to me, you're going to probably have to get a trigger. And I said, oh, really? And then, sure enough, as soon as he said that, I saw my name on this orchestra seating list that it was playing third trombone. There were 4 trombones. I think we were doing a Strauss opera. I can't remember which one it was now. I'll think of it. But I had to hit a low E flat. I never hit a low E flat in my life. I wanted to play first trombone, and I didn't want one of those cheater horns. Okay? So anyway, I went down to John Coffey Music Company, which was right across the street from the New England Conservatory. And that's a whole other thing, visiting with John Coffey. Former bass trombonist of the BSO, and he played in many orchestras. Oh, it was great. He used to teach in this music store and all that. Anyway, I got a trigger horn. I got a Bach 42. And so I brought it to the lesson and stuff, and he was showing me how to work the trigger and take it apart and put a little Vaseline there and put a little oil there and take out the tuning slide and put a few drops down. And so I was getting the hang of that and learning how to find the trigger notes on the horn. And then he had me start doing Bach cello suites, and which I loved. So eventually all that started to come into being. So he worked on just so many things in a natural type of way. And then when I wanted to start taking auditions, we'd work on excerpts. And it was great working on excerpts with him, actually. I know maybe it wasn't his favorite thing, but with me, we got into the music of it, and I wasn't just caught in having to do it one way. And if he thought something was good enough, he left good enough alone. And then if he thought, well, wait a minute, try this little thing into it. And that's where doing the alternate positions on the Mozart Requiem was really useful. And I found my own patterns using those, which worked for me. And he had a wonderful system with the alternate positions. And for him, as he said on one tape, they weren't second-class citizens. They were a part of the instrument. And the fact that they would have a different tone color is to your advantage. So he was really against this idea that every note had to sound exactly the same all the time, from the perspective of only thinking there's one kind of tone, which is really a thing I don't understand. And so by opening this up, it opened up a whole other array of tone colors and possibilities. And so he would demonstrate. I loved hearing the demonstrations and how he would use them so artistically and so fluidly. Was really inspirational. So we kept working on all these kinds of things all the time. And it kept opening up new doors because we were both into the process of finding these. So it was never a dead subject for him. It kept opening up. And the more we knew each other, other stories would open up between us as well.